Konnichiwa, and welcome to the Samurai Way, the podcast where we dive into the wisdom of the samurai, the art of Japanese living, and the philosophies that help us live with purpose and perseverance. I'm Lori Sagawa, and whether you're here to explore Bushido, the code of the samurai, uncover the meaning of Ikigai, or just looking for a little extra gambaru, never give up spirit in your daily life, you're in the right place. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's walk this path together. Are you ready? Let's begin. Konnichiwa, minasan. Thank you so much for being here to the Samurai Way podcast. Every week we have someone extremely interesting and insightful. And so this week is from my guest today, who is Laura G. Anthony. And you will learn about all of her, what brought her from her mother's situation, came around, led her, and guide her into the work that she's doing today. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's really an honor to share some insights with your listeners and talk about our shared intersection with women and brain injury in honor of the month that celebrates both.
And I'm too. I'm a woman, and I'm also a traumatic brain injury survivor. So those that don't know you, Laura, could you just share a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now?
So, as you probably could tell by the introduction that you gave, and thanks so much for that, I really have spent most of my career as a lawyer and as a consultant and as a team leader working in spaces where people think and communicate in different ways. And over the years, I started to notice that a lot of the challenges that we face, whether it's in the workplace or in communities, and actually even in families, come down to how we understand and respond to different ways that people think. And another way of saying different ways of thinking is cognitive or neurodiversity. And this is a perspective that, for me, dates back to childhood because I grew up with a parent who survived a traumatic brain injury. So I've really been navigating the world of neurodiversity for as long as I can remember, and really long before that term even became a buzzword. And that's an experience that really shaped how I see people, how I approach my role as a leader and as an attorney. And it's also shaped the work that I do, both as a disability lawyer, and I also serve as a mediator and an investigator and a hearing officer. And all of those experiences informed what I do today. So in my work, I have helped those who support individuals with disabilities, some of who identify as neurodivergent. And all of those experiences have created unique lessons for me and really reinforced what I learned from a very young age. And that is that many of our systems aren't built for people who think and communicate in different ways. And so now I work with organizations, leaders, and communities to help them create environments where all kinds of minds can thrive. And I take what I learned from psychology and lessons from neuroscience and combine that with my personal and professional experience. And I try to turn those things into practical strategies, things that help people communicate better, reduce bias, and then just work better together more cohesively. And it's really been a joy to help leaders and teams from just being aware of neurodiversity, so understanding that it's out there, to then taking action and creating environments. And those are the things that I do. So, but regardless of whether I'm speaking at a conference or I'm conducting a training for a company, the response has been the same. People want to do better. They want to be more inclusive. They just don't always know how. So I've been thrilled to be part of that and carry on those lessons that I learned from my mom and in childhood.
Well, that was beautiful. Laura, you actually kind of talked about everything that I was going to have. Our first point, which is your childhood experiences inspired your career choices. And, as a child, you had different paths you could have taken. You could have gone down the, oh, woe is me, or, rejecting what happened to your mother. But instead, it feels like you really embraced it and made it part of your career to help people.
I would say that, my mom's brain injury occurred when I was in elementary school. So it's hard to remember a time where there wasn't a need to be in a somewhat of a caretaker role and to have a level of independence that maybe I wasn't super ready for. My mom's brain injury, she had an anoxic brain injury, which meant that the blood flow stopped going to her brain. And that affected her executive functioning, her fine motor skills, her emotional regulation. Before she was had the brain injury, she had been a French teacher, but French was her second language. And when she was in a coma for a extended period of time. When she woke up, she spoke French. She didn't speak English. I did not speak French. And so there was a language barrier. There were physical barriers. She never drove again. She never worked again. And so there were things that I would say, as a child, when you say, that I embraced it, I'm not sure I always embraced it, but I think I was definitely inspired by it. I mean, as a child, I probably had some, strong feelings about, why can't I do this and other kids do that? But I know that looking back, that, everybody in the family were doing the best they could. I remember
Yeah.
I had a huge tricycle. I don't know, have you seen these adult tricycles?
Mm-hmm.
Like kids in the neighborhood were having their, bikes where they put the ribbons on and showing off their bikes. I had this, I think it was like a 1978 Schwinn adult tricycle with an enormous basket on the back. And I would take that to the grocery store, and I would take that, and my brother would ride in the back. He was 4 years younger than I was. And that was kind of the transportation that we had. And I remember, going to the library, going to the orthodontist, getting my braces tightened, all of those things as an independent child kind of had to be. So that was, I think that there were some lessons that I learned from that, but that it did inspire this kind of fascination with how the brains worked. Studied psychology. I love thinking about how people process information, how they interact, how they make decisions, how they handle conflict. Those are all things that just light me up. And so that's why the work that I do now is such a joy, because it really aligns with both my experience and the fascination that I developed when I was in elementary school.
Well, maybe embrace wasn't the right word, but you certainly almost, I don't know, maybe you can think of the word I'm looking for, but you adapted, and
That's
it
true.
also, yeah, adapted, and also, and in some ways, it made you really grow up, doing things that you did that most kids didn't have to think about. And you became think about before the accident and then after the accident, what a difference your world became. But
Very true.
are you the older?
I am oldest
Okay.
daughter, first grandchild, all of the things that,
Mhm.
signal you're going to be the responsible one. And I think
Yes.
that was, I came by that honestly.
Hmm. So that's so, hearing your mother's story, I've never heard of that type, but I do know about my type because I've been in many traumatic brain injury networking groups and talking with people at the speech pathologist. I had two because
Hmm.
um, I had, it was called, I didn't process auditory processing deficit.
Hmm.
I hear really well, but I didn't process it. So I had another speech pathologist that helped me with that, to take information, what I hear, let it go in the brain and make the connection, which it wasn't. So the brain is fascinating, Laura,
It
and
really is.
it's kind of one of the newer frontiers of what is going on, and they're discovering so much. And because of that, I have learned a lot, and I don't take that lightly.
Hmm.
I don't. And so it's a beautiful organ that we have. But I also went through Dr. Amen's protocol and had two brain scans done, and they actually helped me a lot. Plus my at that time my functional medicine doctor helped me a lot. And so I'd like to go on the next point. It's your that and what fascinates me, great minds don't think alike. Could you
So true.
explain? Yeah.
Well, we often make assumptions, in whether it's in the family or whether it's in the workforce, a way about how people should act, right? How people should respond, or how people should interpret your instructions. And those assumptions are wrong a lot of the time. It's because great minds don't think alike. And I love that kind of turn of the phrase because there are so many individuals who you probably know of who are really great thinkers, individuals who are super innovative, who are, disruptors in their industry. And the reality is they sometimes approach things in a way that people don't expect, those out of the box thinkings. And many businesses talk about innovation and growth, but they don't talk about where those ideas actually come from. And more often than not, they come from people who think differently. And so people who might see the world through a different lens, people who might solve problems in unexpected ways, or just like what you've just described, Lori, people who take in information and may communicate in ways that don't match traditional expectations.
Mhm.
So my work is really helping companies and communities and leaders grow by teaching them how to embrace that kind of perspective. And that means helping people recognize that different ways of processing information, you just said auditory processing, different ways of making decisions or different ways of collaborating, they're not barriers like in the workplace. They're actually can be strengths that can lead to better outcomes in those communities. And same thing that could happen in families. So that whole idea of great minds don't think alike. There in some of the talks that I give, and I've trained, I think as you mentioned, I've trained global brands to local schools. What I try to do is help leaders build cultures in which all of
Mm.
those minds can thrive.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it reminds me of the Japanese concept. One of them that we discover and we talk about on this podcast is Gambaro. That's never giving up. Try
Mm,
your hardest, do your best, never give up, and go for broke. And Gambaro is what helped the Japanese during World War II. It helped them after the earthquake, tsunami. The students say that to each other before an entrance exam,
mm.
before sports games, and how does this gambaru work into your situation with your mother?
Well, I think I saw that never giving up mentality, not just from her. I mean, she was also surrounded by family members who were intent and intensive in the support. So I remember my brother and I, we stayed for extended periods of time with different relatives who were pitching in because my dad was assisting with my mom, who was in a rehab facility for quite a long time. And both of us were elementary school. I don't even think my brother was kindergarten age. And so, there was a lot of people who didn't give up and who really assisted in supporting the family. Now, my mom, as I mentioned, she never drove again. She never taught French again. But later, she did regain some skills. And one of the skills that she just was, never left her was this love of learning. And so
Mm.
she had, like as I said, she was a French teacher, but then she's like, I'm going to learn Spanish. And even and so she lived in Mexico for an immersive experience and learned Spanish. And as her brain started to deteriorate towards the end of her life, some of the things that we did when she was in the memory care facility that she absolutely loved was, doing flashcards of different
Mhm.
languages and talking about literature and things like that. So, she couldn't remember if she went to the bathroom, but she really wanted to debate, kind of classic types of intellectual topics. So that never giving up that love of learning is definitely something that I saw in her.
And universal, and the other thing you want to talk about, universally designed supports can benefit all. I mean, you've kind of been touching on that, but if you'd like to share a little bit more about it, that would be great.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I talk about in my programs for business and community leaders, when I'm doing either a keynote address or a workshop, one of the things that I really try to emphasize is that neuro inclusion, which is designing for those different brains, is more than just providing an accommodation or support for
Mhm.
somebody with a disability, although sometimes supports are necessary. Instead, it's about recognizing that, a rising tide lifts all boats. And, what do I mean by that? Well, being neuro-inclusive, so that if you were a leader or a manager or a family member, right, or a friend, when you are more neuro-inclusive, it creates an environment where everybody can thrive. So you've probably heard of the curb cut effect, or if you've seen those curb cuts in the sidewalk, that's when we cut those curb cuts to help. The reason we do that is to help those who use wheelchairs go safely from the sidewalk to the street. But they also help parents pushing strollers, or travelers who are rolling suitcases, or people who are riding bicycles. So that curb cut was designed as a ramp for one population becomes the path for many. And so what I say is that the ramp that you build for one becomes the pathway for many. And that's what that universal design is. That's helping everybody else. So when we design for the difference, and maybe the difference is something like what you talked about of an auditory processing, somebody with auditory processing might not do great with just verbal instructions. They might be supported with, I'm going to tell it to you verbally, but I'm also going to give you a written follow-up. That helps everybody.
Oh, it does.
And so if we design for difference, or we create those universal systems, that becomes the path for many. And when those supports are universal, they don't require somebody to opt in to receive them. You don't have to say, I don't have to recognize I have a need. I find the courage to talk about that need with my boss, or, if we design it in your system, that helps everybody. Because what may appear like a growing willingness to be open about neurodiversity, many in the workforce are trying not to say that they do what's called masking. They try to appear as if they don't have any needs. They don't want to ask for supports, or, what's in the UK called reasonable adjustments, or, things like that would help them do their job or be more engaged. So that universal design helps you build supports into the system, and then benefits a broader group of people, not just those people who disclose the need for them. So that universal design is one of the threshold concepts that I use in my talks with leaders and with organizations.
That is beautiful, because being auditorily challenged a little bit, it's hard to understand, because my hearing is acute. I can hear things in the walls, like the bugs or the rats or whatever in the walls. And I can hear conversations going on all around me, but I hear too well, and I can't filter them out really well. So just having that ability to have the different ways, and that would be really good for schools to realize that not everybody here listens and remembers and processes auditorily. In fact, I think that's the least of the different learning styles. I think more is visual and kinesthetic, and I'm extremely kinesthetic. I said, don't tell me, I'll watch and I'll do it. Just show it to me and I can do it. Especially when I dance, I can, don't tell me, I'll just watch and copy you. I'm a good monkey. And so the universal, what did you say? Universal
design. Yeah.
Universal design is so nice, because people on those curves, people have fallen, they've tripped, and they may not be challenged. It's just that they didn't see it or weren't anticipating it. So if you make it more gradual and organic, that is, a world for everyone. It's not just for a few, but it's a world that will serve everyone. So I think that's really, really beautiful. Laura, I have enjoyed so much speaking with you. I've learned a lot. And is there anything that you would like to leave the audience and listeners with before we wrap this up?
Well, I will say this, as I mentioned earlier, we tend to operate within systems, and whether that system is your business, whether it's a school, like you mentioned, whether it's even our families, where we expect people to adapt to the narrow definitions of where we think people should communicate or contribute. But the truth is, as I mentioned earlier, some of the most creative contributions come from people who don't fit that narrow definition. And another truth is that when somebody doesn't fit the mold, we assume that the problem is with that person, but sometimes the problem is with that environment. Now, there's a saying that I just love. It's that when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows and not the flower. And that's really the heart of the work that I get to do. And I'm just thrilled that I get to do it. Because when we stop asking people to change who they are or how their brains work to fit into the system, that creates a whole, wonderful outcome. Because instead of asking those people to change, we need to create spaces within our systems and our workplaces and in our relationships where they already do. And that's true whether you're leading a team or you're volunteering in your community or showing up for somebody in your family, because learning how to embrace different ways of thinking can completely change how we connect with other people. And it also can completely change the results that we get when we do that.
Oh, I love that. I think you have some really good quotes in what we spoke about today that you could add to your website, which reminds me, there's a way to contact Laura, and it'll be in the description. She has a new website. It's lauraganthony.com, and she'll have her email and different ways that you can get in touch with her if you'd like to speak to her about possibly presenting to your organization or school. And so I want to say thank you, Minasan. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. And without any of you, this wouldn't be possible. So we ask that you would help share, like, subscribe, and even leave a comment. And so I'll call this a wrap, but I hope that I learned a lot from Laura. I hope that you did too, and that you can take this information and share it with others so that we can all make this world a better place. So thank you for now, and goodbye for now. Mata ne. And that's a wrap for today's episode, The Samurai Way. I hope you found a little inspiration, a new perspective, or just something to reflect upon as you go about your day. Now remember, the samurai spirit isn't just about history. It's about how you show up, face challenges, and live with purpose. Whether it's Ikigai guiding your path or a little extra Ganbaru pushing you forward, keep walking strong. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share, or leave a review. It really helps. And if you've got some thoughts, questions, or you just want to connect, just contact me. So until next time, stay focused, stay determined, and keep living with purpose. Mata ne.